This is the 8-Bit Beast and welcome to the Crash 100% Taz. This run aims to complete the game 100% as fast as possible, which means beating all the levels and getting all the gems. To get a gem you need to break all the boxes in a level, so we'll be seeing a lot of destruction today. Getting all the gems unlocks a secret ending through the Great Hall, meaning that beating Cortex actually is not required in this run. This is the first game in the trilogy, but the last to receive 100% Taz. If you're interested in seeing the other games, I have 105% Taz of Crash 3 and Super Boom Fan has 100% Taz of Crash 2. I've been working on this Taz for a bit over 6 months now, using many of the skills I gained from Taz in Crash 3. I'm very excited to see it complete and hope you enjoy this explanation of everything we're about to watch. Okay, so we're going to head straight into level 1, and the first thing that you'll notice is that I'm going to be jumping a lot. I'll barely ever be touching the ground. The reason for that is something called zigzagging. Now, to explain zigzagging, we need to understand how diagonal movement works in this game. If you're moving diagonally, like holding forward and right, that's going to apply both your forward and right speed at the same time, which pretty much makes a right angled triangle. And if we know a bit about Pythagoras, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, you're going to get about root 2 times the speed you would normally have, or that's moving about 1.4 times as fast as you normally would. So zigzagging sort of takes that diagonal movement speed and pushes it straight forward. Because Crash in the air can't turn around very fast, if you alternate left and right very quickly, the game thinks you're moving diagonally, but Crash is still facing forward. So you get about a 1.4 times speed boost that way. The other thing that makes you go a little bit faster is spinning. So normally you'd move about 24 units per frame, but spinning lets you move up to 28 units per frame. However, we only have 5 spins when we start the level, and each spin we use takes 1 second to recharge, so we don't see it used as often as we could. So you'll notice that in the first level I got a gem by breaking all the boxes, and we're going to do exactly the same thing in this level. The only problem is this level has a secret path with boxes on it that only opens up when you have a coloured gem from a later level. But we do have a way around that, and this is seen in normal speedruns as well. You can do some clever jumping up to get to those boxes without having the coloured gem that we need. Usually speedruns would use invincibility, but we can get away without using that with some precise spinning, and it's a bit quicker not to get the invincibility since that takes time. There's the boxes up there, and we've broken them successfully. And that skips having to revisit this level, which would obviously take a lot of time. The other thing I should talk about in this level is cycles, so you'll notice these boulders rolling back and forth, and they're on something called a global cycle, which means they start when the PlayStation is powered on, and then they just keep rolling. So if you get to the boulders at a specific spot, there's pretty much nothing you can do to change where they are. It's always going to be in the same spot at the same time. So I really want to avoid the boulders because I would take damage, and I can usually get around them by timing my cycles well. But if the boulders are in the way, then I would have to wait. So you can only save or lose time in big chunks in this game because there are a lot of global cycles. You can get around it though by managing your spins carefully and managing your mass that you're taking damage on to either time it before or after the cycles. So it's not as black and white as something like a frame rule because you can sort of work around it. So I'm going to talk about some movement tech called box boosting. When Crash jumps on a box, he can get ejected out of it, and if you jump towards the back of the box, you'll get ejected forward, just like this box here. Every time you do that, it saves about a frame or 1/30th of a second, so pretty much every box we see, we're going to save a frame. This also works on objects such as monkeys and turtles and plants, and spikes, but the spikes have a much bigger effect, which saves about 5 frames. It's important to note that those spikes also are on a global cycle, so this level's very dependent on cycles, and you often have to wait for spikes because if they come down, you're not getting past them until they come back up. We have another gem skip coming up here, just jumping over that end goal post there, and that's possible in RTA as well. There's also an alternate method where you jump over the top of the spikes, but it is slower for this Taz. So now we're in this area that we should only need a coloured gem to get in, but we obviously don't have that coloured gem yet, and we want to break all the boxes in here. These little green things here are slippery slopes and they can make you move faster, and I have to run down those slopes. But you don't get to zigzag when you're on the ground, so it actually doesn't speed Crash up that much compared to zigzagging in the air. We're just jumping through this back section here to break the box, and then we're heading back out here. And you can see me managing my spins there. I'm trying to hit spins on those spikes because each spin there saves 5 frames rather than 1 frame, which a spin usually saves. And this is the point where it's worth talking about spin management more in general. So with spins, they'll generally save a frame roughly of movement, and they'll speed you up to 28 units per frame rather than 24 units per frame. That being said, they do take about 2 frames to speed up to full speed, so if you can, it's actually better to chain spins together. If you do multiple spins in a row, they can push you forward 29 units rather than just 24 units, saving a little bit of time there. So you'll see at the start of levels, I tend to use spins in groups where I can, unless I need spins for managing particular sections of levels. So here, if I'm doing a box boost, for example, I'll use a spin to line up my coordinates with that box boost. Because boxes only push you forward to a particular position rather than a particular distance, so you need to be very careful of that. This level's always fun because you can outrun the boulder there with some zigzagging, and it gets to the point where you can barely see it on screen at all. The other thing I should mention here is something that I call Z optimization, which basically means Crash goes along the Z axis for the majority of levels, so your left-right movement you want to minimize as much as possible. With zigzagging inherently, there's always a little bit of left-right movement, so you can use that wiggle to move you left and right where you can, but if you have tighter corners you have to take tighter turns, which obviously slows Crash down. Spinning is most effective when moving straight forward or at straight diagonals, so you'll often see me spinning on straightaways or if I'm moving really diagonally. And that's just part of managing the spins as well. Of course, you don't want to use up all your spins if you're going to have to wait for a global cycle anyway, so they'll be managed according to that as well. So now we're in upstream, and this is the perfect time to talk about how jumping works in this game. You can usually only jump when Crash is on the ground, but spins can mess with this sometimes. So if you spin and walk off a ledge, then when you end that spin, it'll think Crash is on the ground for a very short amount of time. So what you can do is spin off a ledge and then jump out of that in the air. There's a different version of this called a double jump, which we're seeing there and there. And pretty soon we're going to see a regular sub jump. So yeah, sub jumps are a bit easier to understand, just like that, spin off and then jump out of the spin, but a double jump is really the same concept. You kind of clip into the leaf and then you spin and it thinks Crash is on the ground, and then you can get another jump out of the air. We're also using the wall physics there to do yet another gem skip, and that saves a revisit to this level. So we'll be seeing a lot of double jumps just like that one there, and they're pretty useful all over the game. So it sort of involves having Crash clip into the ground and having it think he's in a grounded state while still doing a jump. Often you'll see it paired with a spin, but that spin is really to help clip into the leaf. You can get double jumps without spins, but they're really useful over the whole TAS, and we're going to be seeing them quite a lot in this run. And it's just important to note as well that double jumps only work when jumping off of objects that are also platforms, so it's pretty limited in its use cases. You can't just do it off of any piece of ground. So we're in our first boss fight, Papu Papu, and this is probably the point you'll notice that I'm playing on the Japanese version, and I want to talk about some key differences here. Papu Papu has more health on the Japanese version, which does make this fight slower than the English version, but there are some differences in the gem mechanics in the Japanese version. The gems are all reordered, so the key thing with the Japanese version is we avoid a revisit to Road to Nowhere because we get that gem before Road to Nowhere. The gems are all in different orders in the Japanese version. The other thing that makes Japanese faster is the box cutscenes at the end of levels. Boxes will drop on Crash's head when he misses one, and only one box drops on him in the Japanese version, whereas the US version drops the number of boxes that you missed on his head. Obviously that takes a long time if you miss them. Another key difference is with the Japanese version, if you die you can still get the box gem, whereas if in the US version you have to do the level in one clean run. That doesn't really come into play here in the TAS, but it's worth noting. And the other thing is that the level of the high road is actually shorter in the Japanese version. So overall, 100% ends up being much faster on the Japanese version than the English version, and that's why I've chosen this one for the TAS. Now, speaking of box cutscenes at the end of levels, this will be the first level that we don't get the gem, meaning we're going to have to come back and revisit this level. That's the blue gem there that would appear as a platform, but we don't have that blue gem yet. What that means is that we're going to come back and revisit, and we're going to get a different cutscene at the end of this level. Weird thing about this cutscene is it's actually kind of RNG dependent. You'll see the box drop on Crash's head, just one because it's a Japanese version, and then he'll tilt left and then right, and that was pretty quick compared to some speedruns. The reason is I've manipulated the RNG to achieve that. That kind of depends on when you jump on the end of level portal and where you jump on the end of level portal. That wasn't known when the 80% TAS was made, so it wasn't included in that, but in this TAS I've made sure every time I don't get the gem in a level and get that cutscene, I get the optimal RNG, so I get it as quick as possible. When you do get a gem from a level, the cutscene is consistent, so you don't have to manipulate that, which is majority of levels in this TAS. So in this level Hog Wild, we're pretty much just going to be riding to the end and collecting all the boxes. It is essentially an auto-scroller, so no matter how much I've tried to speed this up, it's pretty much the same speed every time you do it. I occasionally have lost or gained a couple of frames, presumably due to lag, but yeah, it's basically an auto-scroller. One interesting thing to note about this level is you do get the green gem from it on the Japanese version, and that green gem can be used to skip castle machinery. So that would be an advantage of using the Japanese version for any percent on this game. The other thing to note about this level is it does take away all of your masks, so when I come into the next level I'll have no masks and I'll have to build those up again. That means that I really needed to use up all my masks in the previous level, otherwise they would go to waste when they got taken away here. So we're on our way into Native Fortress, which is going to be another one of those really big climbing levels, but unfortunately I'm in a really bad spot of the global cycle right now. If I just went full speed up to the Crusher, I would get blocked for about a second or two. So what I'm going to do with that time at the start of this level is actually slow down and grab a mask, and then that mask won't lose any time to grab, even though it looks really slow like this. It actually won't lose any time because I'm waiting for that global cycle anyway. So given that I'll have the mask after that global cycle, I'm going to save a bit of time later on with it. And that was a Crusher right there that I had to wait on. And you can see it was a pretty tight fit through it. You'll notice that I'm not breaking all the boxes here, and that's because this again is another level that we have to revisit. The gem is pretty high up in the air, so unfortunately we can't get it on our first trip in here. So we'll see here the Crusher is about to crush me pretty soon, and I'm actually going to be jumping over a Crusher and out of bounds a bit. So that'll be coming up in just a moment. So it's this section just here, over the Crusher, we take some damage, and that was the use of that mask that I grabbed earlier. And now we're just going to go up to the climbing section. Obviously that saves a bit of time because I don't have to wait for the cycle on the Crusher coming back up. So the other thing I should mention is like a tribesman boost. It's one of the strategies in these levels. So the green tribesman people, if you spin them, you'll get a little boost and you'll hit about a speed of 10 rather than a speed of 7. So you can actually retain that speed by spinning through the air, and it's pretty good for maintaining your speed over a bit of distance. With a box boost, that only speeds you up for a frame, but with a tribesman boost, that does it for a bit longer. Now we've got a big climbing section to finish off this level. You really need to maintain your spins for those climbing sections because it's quite easy to run out of spins. So you basically need to come in with 5 spins, meaning you miss out on all those opportunities before to hit those Crusher boosts and green slime boosts and everything like that. Okay, so that's pretty much all of Island 1 done in this game, but we will be coming back for a few revisits so we couldn't get the gems in those levels before. We're up to Up the Creek now, which is another water level. We'll see lots of double jumps and everything again, and I'm going to grab this mask here. We'll see why in just one moment. I'll double jump off this leaf, and then damage boost off this fish. That lets us cross that gap a lot easier. It is possible to do that one without damage, but it is a bit slower because you have to use the wall geometry. Again, you can see these double jumps are really helping out when I can't quite make the leaf cycles. Obviously, it would be a bit better to make the leaf cycles because double jumps are a tad slow, but it is nice to have that option available. We're climbing up the wall here, and this is going to be a fairly lengthy one. You'll notice that there's no boxes on the path here, and that's where climbing up the wall is really useful. The reason I climb up the wall there is so it can skip a couple cycles. It is actually slower to climb the wall because you have to slow down while you're climbing, but it's really good if you're going to have to wait for cycles anyway to use the wall instead. Bit of backtracking there to get all the boxes in the level, and I have to make sure I don't go too far ahead of that TNT before it explodes. So again, we'll be using the wall climbing there because that leaf gap is a little bit too big to jump over, but it's only a pretty short trip into the wall there. The other thing I should mention about these levels is just when you're climbing those mossy logs, you can go on the left or the right hand side there and not lose as much speed while climbing up. You have to be pretty precise with it though. Sometimes spinning helps you climb up there a bit quicker as well. Okay, we're coming up to our next boss here, which is Ripperoo, and the idea of this is you want to explode TNTs on him, hit him 3 times, and then you've won. The intended method is that you jump on the TNTs and set off the timer on the TNTs. They'll then blow up on him, but you'll see I'll be able to spin those TNTs and actually hit him with that blast radius from spinning it. Now you might be wondering, how do I spin the TNTs and remain safe? And the reason is the blast radius just gradually expands out. So if you're able to run away from the TNTs quick enough, you can spin a TNT and not take any damage. It's kind of a cool little thing, similar to a nitro jump or something like that. I die right at the end of Ripperoo. It's a bit weird. It doesn't save or lose any time. It's just a cool thing that you can do at the end rather than watching the intended cutscene. I thought originally maybe it would mess with the global cycles, because when you die it does reset the global cycles, but unfortunately it didn't have any impact on that. Alright, next up is the Lost City, and this level's going to have a really interesting piece of tech called Lizard Boosting. You'll see what it is here. So what the lizard does is when you spin against it, it ups your speed by a significant amount, and you can retain quite a bit of that speed by continuing to jump and spin. We're going to see another lizard boost coming up pretty soon, but it'll allow us to do a bit more of an extra skip with it. So with these crushes, you can get above them and kind of get stuck in the wall, and you can jump up. So we're going to see here, jump up above it, get stuck in the wall, and jump up here. That saves a bit of backtracking around this section. Now this section will have a few double jumps, so here and here. And then we jump up these platforms here. You'll notice I'm jumping on some of the platforms when they're in the wall, and you can actually achieve that by facing crash into the wall and sort of holding forward into the wall. So you have to maintain your jumping angle to face crash into the wall, which is a tad slow. But it does save a lot of time because you don't have to wait for those platform cycles. Obviously a lot of these out and in crushes are on the global cycles, so you got to be really careful in this level, but conveniently you can jump around them if you need to. It just loses a tiny bit of time. So I'm able to get boosts off most of these lizards where I can, but some of them I do need to jump up and access boxes, so I won't be able to do that there. And we got every box there, so we won't need a revisit to this level. Alright, so in these gem cutscenes, you'll probably notice my percentage isn't climbing that quickly, and you might be wondering why I'm not doing any of the bonus levels. It turns out that actually doesn't really matter for any of this game 100%. It'll hit 100% when we get all the gems, but we'll see that later. It's actually pretty funny how much it jumps by. Alright, now we've got Temple Ruins. You'll see me get the Aku Aku at the start of this level. Reason being, usually the mask takes a while to drop, but because I had to break the other boxes there anyway, I could get the mask without really waiting that much for it. Got a bit of a TNT boost there, and then we're going to be hitting some potential global cycles. So these doors open and close, and they are in global cycles, and you can see I had to wait for that one a bit there. It's pretty inconvenient, but there's not much we can do about it. Those doors are probably one of the most significant cycles in this game. So the other thing I should mention is box breaking. These levels have quite a few boxes in them in very big stacks. You would anticipate that you just spin and break boxes, can't get more complicated than that, but actually it does. So holding spin allows you to break boxes for a bit longer. So when you do an initial spin, your spin hitbox comes out and you break some boxes. But when you hold it for longer, that hitbox remains for longer. So if you're ever trying to break boxes in this game, you want to hold spin for a longer time. We can also see these flame things here. I can avoid damage by just jumping on the edge of it there, but you have to be really careful. More often than not, I actually can't avoid damage on those things, so I have to either take the hit or do some weird, very slow geometry jumping around it. You can avoid flame damage if you're grounded and spinning through flames, which is a weird thing that I found out, but it's pretty rare that you're in that situation. The other thing I should mention is just the bats at the end of that level, and sometimes if they're coming past, you have to spin through them and waste a spin, essentially. Alright, so next level coming up is Road to Nowhere, and this is one of those bridge levels that's fairly linear, notorious for being quite difficult, especially in the remakes, and also well known for the trick where you can jump on the handrails. I won't be doing that too much, but I will be doing it occasionally. So these bridge pieces break off. You can get boosts off little things like that and the little ice bits there. And really importantly, this level is very different on the Japanese version because this doesn't require a revisit. Because we already have the gem needed for this level, we can ride that here and get all the boxes, whereas if you're playing on the English version, you would have to do a revisit to this level in 100%. One of the many reasons why Japanese is faster for this category here. So I can do a few box breaks here and a couple TNT spins. Normally you'd wait for those TNT timers, but with Taz Precision we can avoid those explosions pretty well. You just got to be really careful about jumping off these gems as soon as possible, because obviously you don't want to waste time there. It's alright a cheeky sub jump off the gem to get back a bit sooner as well. So again, just doing box boosting and grouping spins together as much as possible. General movement tech in this game. It's all small stuff that saves a frame or two here and there, but it's really important to do. You'll also see me spinning forward off those ice blocks there, and that's because with slippery slopes, spinning off them can sometimes help you get a boost, but it really depends on the timing. Gotta be careful with that. Now we're going to jump over here and get a few secret boxes there. Those bridge pieces that I'm jumping on, they're not just the ones I chose to jump on, they're pretty much the only pieces that are actually there. So yeah, it's a pretty treacherous part of the level, this one. You'll notice as well these gem cutscenes getting slightly longer every time. There's not a whole lot we can do about that, but they do get ridiculously long towards the end. Alright, now next level is Boulder Dash, so another Boulder Chase level. One thing to note about these levels is that they're actually pretty laggy. So when I originally did this TAS, I was trying to match the any percent TAS through all of Island 1, just so I got good at movement and knew that I wasn't missing anything. But these levels caused a big issue for me because of all the lag, really. They're pretty hard to optimize, and you've got to do your turns early. So you'll notice me already like kind of taking a weird angle here, and that's so that I can hit the edge of this cave and kind of get around these pillars well in advance. So you do get a little bit of free movement with your zigzagging. You do move left to right naturally, so you don't want to take sharp turns, you just want to take light turns. Now all these platforms as well that are moving, they're objects, so I can get boosts off them. You can sometimes get boosts off the little brown fences, and you can get boosts off the boxes. But box boosting on these levels is really hard because all the boxes are under low roofs, which you often bonk on. You'll notice me jumping on the end of those platforms there, and that's because I want to get boosts off them as much as I can. This is yet another level that requires a revisit as well. You'll see a gem at the end. So we'll come back and this will be one of the very last levels we do in the game. But with revisits, I do manipulate the RNG. So you'll notice that I jumped a little bit more forward on that platform than I probably needed to. It's not a mistake, it's to manipulate RNG for these screens. You can actually lose very significant amounts of time on those screens if you don't manipulate the RNG there. Alright, next up we have Sunset Vista. Just kidding, it's actually Slippery Climb. So that might be a surprise to you if you've played this game before, but in the Japanese and English versions, they've swapped the location of Slippery Climb and Sunset Vista. Just a little strange change. You'll see a lot of sub-jumps in this level, so you might notice soon a little sub-jump out of here, just to get onto that platform there. Of course, the level's pretty reliant on global cycles when you do the climb on the left-hand side, but we don't have too much trouble with that here. There is a little bit of waiting around though. These stairs are actually a very big pain. I was able to get some jumps off them, but it was really inconsistent. I can occasionally get 2 jumps off, but yeah, that one there was a really hard one to get. Luckily, I didn't have to optimize them too much because I'm really waiting on the global cycles of these platforms coming up here. But if I'd had to optimize them anymore, it would have been an absolute nightmare. You'd see a few double jumps off these platforms, but realistically, there's not a whole lot I can do to speed these up. You'll notice the spikes that are kind of around the place. I can avoid taking damage on those by spinning just like that, and then I get the bird there. But yeah, there'll be a double jump coming up off this platform, so I can make that jump there, and it all depends on cycles. So as you can see in this game, it's very global cycle dependent, but realistically there are clever ways to get around quite a few of the global cycles. Obviously, spin management is a huge factor in this level because there's a lot of boxes to break, but also a lot of spikes that I don't want to take damage on. So this will be Island 2 pretty much done, and coming up next we have Koala Kong. Keep your ear out, the music is a little bit different than in the English version. And this boss is kind of interesting because it depends on RNG. So Koala Kong will throw a few boulders throughout the fight, and then the last boulder he throws, you can spin back and hit him with it. But before he throws that very last boulder, he's going to kind of walk out, and the distance that he walks is dependent on luck. So we have a bit of manipulation to do in this fight here. But realistically, once you've manipulated out the luck, it's pretty much just an auto-scroller, so not a whole lot to say. That being said, this is the perfect opportunity to talk about something called zip-zagging, which I don't use in this TAS. Now, if you've seen some Crash TASes before, you might be familiar with zip-zagging. It looks absolutely bonkers. So what happens is Crash will jump and you kind of wiggle the analog stick or D-pad back and forth along the diagonals. What happens with that is he builds up a lot of negative speed, and then he can face Crash away from where you want to go and just zoom off in whatever direction you want. And Crash gains an absolutely huge amount of speed and can zip through levels in like 10-20 seconds. There is a limit to how fast you can zip through levels, because if you start outrunning the camera, the collision doesn't load and you fall through the ground and die. But you can get through the levels very quickly. The reason I haven't used zigzagging is because realistically it makes all the levels look the same, and it kind of gets less interesting after you see a few levels like that. But if you are interested in seeing some zigzagging, I have done a Crash 1 any percent low optimization demonstration, or low TAD, which is basically a TAS just without a whole bunch of optimization put into it. And I've also done a few full-on Crash 3 TASs that incorporate zigzagging. So it's pretty cool the first time you see it, but I think it's more interesting to have a TAS which the movement looks a bit more traditional and it's not completely broken. Zigzagging is kind of similar to like super swimming in the Wind Waker if you've ever seen it, and it kind of looks like a BLJ in Mario 64 once you pull it off. So this level is heavy machinery, and it brings in a very common theme in this game of camera stuff. So the camera's kind of weird in this level. It's going to follow you, and you'll see I'll jump down here kind of early and then zip off to the left. I should have gone more to the right before I jumped down, but I didn't actually need to because the camera still followed me. Now if I had turned left too early, the camera wouldn't have followed me at all, and I would have been able to go a bit further, but then I would have fallen through the ground because the collision hadn't loaded. Just like what I said with zigzagging before, the collision sometimes doesn't load if you're off screen. So this level has a lot of very careful balancing of the camera, making sure that we don't go too far off screen, but have the camera follow us. That box stack right there was horrible to figure out how to break. It was, yeah, took me a very long time. Now we got a little damage boost there and a jump up to get to this section. We're going to do big auto scroller skips here. I'm going to do a little camera work down to jump here and jump up on these zippers. So when you spin on these, you get an instant bounce. So that's why I can jump up those really quick. Now I'm doing something called like 3D jumping around there, because normally you'd have to like avoid the walls, but you can just come out into 3D into the camera and then that avoids all the walls for you. So coming up next is the level Cortex Power, and it's definitely the most non-linear level in this game. It does have a gem path that we normally have to unlock and do a revisit, but we will have a skip for that, as we'll see later on in the level. There's a lot of branching paths, but this path that I'm going to take is fairly standard through it. These little bolts of electricity can be pretty frustrating to deal with, but luckily they don't cause me too much trouble. Now this Aku Aku box, I did break it, hoping to come back and be able to nab the mask, but unfortunately it was gone by the time I came back. I like to have as many masks as I can just for damage boost reasons, but yeah, this wasn't an option here. The reason it takes so long to get a mask is because when you break the box, you have to wait for it to fly all the way up and then down again, which just takes far too long and it's often not worth it. So I hit the enemy into the box up there and I'm going to head straight back, and then we're going to do the gem skip. So there's a wall coming up here that we can actually get hooked on, jump up and over, and then come down and hit this box here. And now we're on the secret gem path, so we really shouldn't be here yet. Gonna use the TNTs to break all those boxes, and then we're gonna come out of the gem path. We're gonna do another little wall jump out here. So yeah, walls are kind of weird in this game. Sometimes you can just get hooked on them and jump through. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but they're pretty consistent. They can get that wall jump in RTA, so we have a consistent setup for it, which I helped to find quite a few years ago. But yeah, that's Cortex Power. It looks pretty much the same as RTA, just with some speedier skips in there. Alright, so next level coming up is Generator Room, and it's going to look pretty different to an RTA speedrun. There's a lot of scenery around the level, and we can often jump on that to cut corners really, really well. But we're actually going to see invincibility in this level for the first time. Invincibility is really good in RTA, but not as good in TAS. So when you're walking on the ground with invincibility, it goes about as fast as if you were zigzagging in the air. Now, given that TAS can perfectly zigzag, invincibility doesn't really save much time. But in RTA, since a human can't perfectly zigzag, invincibility is pretty fast. I hit the mask there and come back and hit the box. I gotta wait for the mask to come down anyway. And you'll see me cut some really big corners with this invincibility. Like there. And here coming up. Invincibility helps to break big box stacks, so that's the other reason why it's pretty fast, and it's going to run out just here as I'm hitting the auto scroller. But I have just enough health to make it through here without waiting for the platform. That is really tight, and it's one of the big reasons why I get invincibility, otherwise we'd have to go through that really slow auto scroller, which I wouldn't want to do. So that path looks pretty much the same as the any percent TAS, just with breaking a lot more boxes along the way. Alright, coming up next is the level Toxic Waste. There's not much to say about this level apart from that it's pretty clearly inspired by a particular arcade game, but it is very linear. You just go straight to win. You'll notice I skipped the mask there, reason being is in the Japanese version, when you collect a mask, you get a little text box that takes a frame to clear. So I don't want to get masks if I don't actually need masks. You would think I quite often need masks, but there's a boss level coming up next, and that's going to take away the masks anyway. Break the top box here, get a boost off the bottom box, that's always useful. And then we're going to be box boosting through here as much as we realistically can. I'm going to try and use the enemies to break boxes where I can, but obviously not boxes that I can boost off, like this TNT. Dodging the barrels is quite difficult, and it kind of depends what cycle you're on, but you can often just jump to the side and make it through. So the next level coming up is a boss, and it's Pinstripe. Pinstripe basically just shoots at Crash and then occasionally becomes vulnerable, and then you can hit him when he's vulnerable. The interesting thing about Pinstripe is there's been an improvement found on this fight since the Any% Taz was published. Essentially, if you delay one of the hits on Pinstripe, then the whole fight ends up being quicker. So this will look pretty similar to an RTA speedrun, but it'll be quicker than the Any% Taz. Of course, this wasn't known when the Any% Taz was published, though. Again, for whatever reason, the Japanese music is different to the US music. For the play around in this boss, I try and stand on his head quite a bit. I always like to try and do some play around where I can. It's actually pretty difficult to stay on there. If you spin, you'll fall down, and then if you move slightly, you'll fall down. But there we go. So next level coming up is the High Road, and this is another key difference between the Japanese and English versions. This level's actually cut in half for some reason on the Japanese version. Like, it just stops, and then there's the end of the level. And in fact, you can actually just keep going past the end of the level and the camera keeps going. That's the interesting thing about this game, is the camera data sometimes hints at what was in development. So the camera keeps going at the end of this level because, well, the US version keeps going. And in some other levels, like I think Sunset Vista, the camera keeps going past the end of that level, and the beta version ended up going further. When they made the final version of Sunset Vista, they cut it shorter. So that's the interesting thing about this game. You can see the leftovers in the camera work. This is pretty much the same as what we saw before. We're going to be boosting off of those icy slopes, and then boosting off of turtles where we can. And that's the end of the level. Quite a short one indeed, and we won't need to revisit this. Alright, now speaking of Sunset Vista, that's going to be the level coming up next. So in the English version, we normally see Slippery Climb here, but that's not the case in the Japanese version. This level is really, really long, and it's got a lot of cycles in it. We can see that flame cycle straight away. I've just lost the mask to it, that's fine. That's what the masks are for, they're for damage boosting. But I'm going to be carefully managing my spins with the lizards and the bats here. Got a few lizard boosts here. And I actually had to wait for that lizard boost because if I did it too soon, I would hit the cycle with the pusher. So a little sub jump there to get in front of the pusher. And another lizard boost here to zip past everything. Now again, we're going to be seeing a lot of push and crash towards the wall to skip waiting for these platforms to come out, and when we hit these cycles here, a lot of double jumps to kind of climb a bit quicker. Now that cycle obviously was in a terrible spot, but luckily with Taz tools we can usually beat these cycles. I had to take damage there because the flames are actually really hard to avoid, and another damage there just to damage boost up off the flame. Now I'm going to get a mask here which is going to look really slow, but I'm actually waiting for this cycle to come back in. As you can see, I barely just came at it as the pusher was going back into the wall. Got another Cortex token there, we're going to get all three here. Couple box boosts. And another bad cycle there. I had some pretty bad luck when tazzing this with the global cycles. Okay, so we got our third Cortex token, and we're actually going to go to a bonus level this time. These levels give you keys which open up other levels in the game that you can't normally get to. You don't actually need to get all the boxes here, so I'm just going to get to the end as fast as possible. Now normally you grab the key and go into this little exit portal, but if you jump away from him quick enough you can die, and that actually brings you back to the level with the key. So you're actually grabbing the key there and jumping off the edge. I found it really difficult to get in the Taz, so I'm actually pretty impressed that people pull that off in real-time speedruns. Alright, and that's Sunset Vista done. One of definitely the longest levels in this game. Alright, so coming up next is the level Lights Out, and the gimmick of this level is that the Aku Aku masks are your light source. So when you get them, it lights up the room, and if you take damage, the room goes dark again. And this level actually requires a revisit because we need a gem to get up to a high up area in the level. So I'm going to be going through the level normally, and I'm not going to grab any Aku Aku masks. That's partially for speed because I don't want the text box of grabbing them, and also it's just a bit fun to do the entire level in the dark. What you can't see is that I'm managing some platform cycles that move back and forth. So I'm jumping off the edges of the levels and trying to make those cycles. I want to be jumping on the platforms as they're moving forward through the level, because then Crash can walk along them and sort of use some of that platform forward moving speed to boost a bit forward through the level. I had to jump on this Aku Aku mask because it was in a very tight doorway and I couldn't get through very easily without breaking the box. Keep in mind that although I do get a text box and that loses some time with an Aku Aku mask, I still do get a box boost by jumping on the box, so that also saves a bit of time. Generally it's slower to grab the masks, but realistically it doesn't lose as much time as you might expect. And there we go. See me zipping to the left on that end of level portal and jumping a bit further than I needed to. That again is to manipulate this screen to make sure I don't lose any time on it. If you do lose time, what it looks like is Crash looks back and forth a few times. Alright, next up is Jaws of Darkness, which is another absolutely huge level. You can see me getting the Aku Aku mask, and that's primarily due to a lot of these flames in this level. I'll often need to take damage on them like that to get across, but also I want to get invincibility a bit later on in this level. So with those spikes, you can spin through them. They're not as much of a threat as you might think, and same thing goes for these bats here. But again, I'm plagued by the global cycles in this level. So that's the other thing about grabbing those masks. That I actually didn't lose any time to grab those masks before because I was waiting on the global cycles anyway. And that's part of the key to routing this game. I often had to go back and redo levels just to do extra mask management. So again here we're using a lot of sub jumps to cut corners where we can. Spinning enemies into boxes is always beneficial. And now we've got the invincibility. The invincibility is going to help us break boxes from a distance like that. And like this. Now we've got an absolutely huge stack of boxes here, so I'm going to do a combination of spinning while holding circle, getting underneath boxes to break them on my head, and then using invincibility to break those boxes. But again here, all that optimization is not a waste, but it doesn't really matter too much, because this door is going to close on me, and I got to wait for it anyway. But part of the thing of managing global cycles is when that door closed on me, I made sure I had all my spins built up, because I don't want to waste spins before the door closes, if I can have 5 spins for after the door closes. I've got my third Cortex token again, which means we're going to go to a bonus round and grab a key. Again, same strategy here. We're going to jump off at the end and die rather than watching the cutscene to get back. So keep your eye out for that one. Alright, and back across to the main path here. So again, another unfortunate global cycle there, but I did squeeze past that last bit of door there. Alright, coming up next is the castle machinery level, and the interesting thing about this level is that you can skip it in any percent if you have the green gem. Unfortunately, skipping it means you wouldn't be breaking any boxes, so we're going to have to do the whole level in 100%. But as we come into the level, just keep your eye out to the left, you'll see a green gem. If we rode that up, we'd skip the entire thing. You might be thinking with some zigzagging or something I could make that jump across the end level portal there, but it doesn't actually work. There's an invisible wall there stopping us. So one of the really exciting things about this level is there's a very big global cycle that I managed to make. It saves about 13.3 seconds, so I'll point that out when it happens. But everything is very tightly optimized to make it happen. These conveyor belts are also a key theme. You can see me walking on them. Now, as I said before, walking is slow because you can't zigzag, but the conveyor belts give you enough of a boost that it's actually worth it in the end. You can see me doing a lot of double jumps off these platforms, and that just allows me to jump up a bit quicker than waiting for them to rise. I'm just going in front of the steam here, and that's no longer a threat. And trying to jump down and cut corners with the camera as much as possible. I was pretty pleased with those 6 boxes because I could get through them without really losing too much time. And now we're into more conveyor belt territory. This bit coming up is my favourite box break in the TAS. You saw a big lag spike in there as well. The game actually lagged there. And here's a cycle that I saved. So up here and then this platform I just barely catch. And if I didn't catch that, I'd have to wait 13.3 seconds for it to come back down. Skipping the auto scroller here with a bit of damage, and that is the end of the level. Right next to the start of the level. Alright, coming up next is the last boss that we're going to fight in this run, and that's Nitrous Brio. We don't fight Cortex because you actually don't need to in 100%, it's kind of strange. But the premise of this boss is he's going to throw some green goo on the ground, and we've got to jump on that and get it into him. So there it is. But if you get too close to him, he puts his arms up, and that actually makes him throw the green goo a bit slower. So you'll notice that I'm hanging all the way towards the back of the stage. Reason for that is I don't want him to put his arms up. You'd be surprised how far away he can be and he will still put his arms up. It looked like I spammed through some of that goo, but I'm technically jumping on it. It's a little bit weird how it works. You got to sustain your jumps a bit, and it was pretty hard to figure out. But I use the any percent TAS as a guide. I saved a couple frames on there just by not having his arms go up, but I think it was only 1 or 2 frames that I actually saved. And then yeah, those last 3 hits you've just got to jump on him. They're pretty much an auto scroller. Like you can jump at Embryo and then be jumping on him and not hit him yet. You'll only hit him when he's actually vulnerable. Alright, now we're up to the lab, which is our last level before we really have to start backtracking. We've got these lightning bolts to deal with and also these doors. They can be a bit tricky. Often I can get away without using the exclamation mark boxes, which close the floors in, because I can just jump over the floors. I spin that TNT from the back. That was actually really hard to line up. And then I just jump straight past these lab guys. Alright, so I'm spinning him forward, and he actually broke a few boxes back there, including like a TNT. That's a really big time save for him to do that, because he opens the door earlier. Usually with these doors, if you hit the boxes, the doors take a while to open like that, and you can actually get stuck on the doors. So any earlier that you can open the doors always helps. And that's really the last level we've got before our backtracking session. You'll notice that I get a colored gem from this, and that's the last colored gem that I'm going to get up here, and I'm going to work my way back through the map. So now we can do all those revisits that we weren't able to do before, because we should have all the colored gems that we need to get through there. Alright, heading back, and our first revisit here is Lights Out. You'll remember that I needed a gem to get up to the top area, and now we have that gem. So I'm going to be breaking all the boxes along the way here, and now you can actually see the level that we were doing before. Isn't that wonderful? So again, these platforms are pretty stationary, but we'll see pretty soon there'll be ones that move back and forth. There's a lot of sub-jumps off the right side of the screens, and these doors can be an absolute pain to jump under. I was pretty lucky with cycles in this level overall. Yeah, and I was able to make it pretty well. Unfortunately, with some of the box layouts, getting a box boost jump off of these isn't always possible, but sometimes if you jump just behind a box and spin, your spin hitbox hits the box, and then you get a boost anyway. And there's the yellow gem we need, so I'm just going to wait on that. You do have to stay standing on it, so I can't be jumping around now. And then I'm going to jump as early as possible around here, get those last 3 boxes, and beat the level. Alright, next revisit we have is Fumbling in the Dark, and this is the level that we needed the key to open before. So you see the map pushed me forward when I finished that level, so I had to come back. And here's Fumbling in the Dark. This first bit's really nice. A lot of cheeky sub-jumps there to get those boxes quickly. It's one of my most favourite parts of this Taz. Doing that normally is pretty difficult because you got to make sure you don't die, but obviously that's not a risk in the Taz. And this level's pretty much the same as Lights Out, just with the extra risk there of tighter cycles. With these moving platforms, I can catch the cycles when they're moving backwards, but it is a lot slower. First of all, when they're moving backwards and I jump on them, it does kill my speed for a little while. It makes me move a bit slower while I'm on them and jumping off of them. The other thing is, usually the way that I beat the cycles is by doing double jumps or sub jumps, and that involves spinning while the game thinks you're grounded. Now, it's great that it thinks you're grounded because you get another jump out of it, but realistically, if it thinks you're grounded, then zigzagging doesn't work. So on that first half of a double jump, like the first jump so to speak, you actually can't zigzag and it does lose a bit of time. So you have to be careful. Double jumps are really useful, but they are pretty slow. Okay, and that marks all the Island 3 levels done, and we're going to go back and do some revisits in Island 2 and Island 1. At this point, we actually have a bit of flexibility in the order we tackle the levels. So I could do Whole Hog first, or I could go all the way back to Island 1 first. And the way that that all works out is primarily due to global cycles, but also due to masks. I do have a mask right now, so I'm not going to do Whole Hog. I'm actually going to go all the way back to Island 1. The reason I want to skip Whole Hog for now is because I would lose my mask if I went in there. I want to keep my mask for this level. If you've watched RTA speedruns, you'll notice they do Whole Hog, and that's because they want a mask for the last Boulder Chase level. The reason they want the mask is because they have to spin a TNT and they use it to damage boost through. With a Taz, I can avoid the blast radius, so it's not a big issue for me, and I can put the mask to better use here. So there's a slight change in level order compared to RTA, but it is what it is. It's a little bit faster to do it this way. Of course, it all depends on how your global cycles line up, and as you can see, I'm getting some pretty close calls with these boulders. I did have to take a damage to get through that one just before, but I managed to avoid the rest of them. Now that we have the gem, we can come down this path. All we need to do is step on it and then walk straight off. So you'd normally ride the gem downwards, but you don't even need to do that. As long as the gem's there, then the area kind of loads underneath. Whereas if you try and fall down there without the gem, you just die instead. Now what I've got coming next is Native Fortress Revisit. You might be wondering, do I have many options in terms of level order? I talk so much about global cycles and you might think, oh well, realistically you could change the level order and you could try a whole bunch of stuff until global cycles work. So unfortunately it's not that simple. You do need all the gems before you come back and do your revisits due to map movement. But also when you beat a level, it pushes you one level forward on the map. So that's kind of locked in, and if I try to do the levels all backwards on my revisits, I keep getting pushed forward when I complete levels, so that would actually be slower overall. But we're coming back into this level, using some key strategies such as spinning down green slopes, spinning off spiky things to get boost forward, and then saving my spins for the climbing sections. With these climbing sections, the main bottleneck is actually hitting the little spinners with your spins, not actually climbing up as quickly as you can. So I actually climb up suboptimally so that I can hit the spinners sooner, because if I climb up optimally, I'm actually too fast for the spinners and I actually lose time to waiting for them. You'll notice when I land on green slopes, sometimes I will spin, and that's because I don't want to lose speed while landing. Alright, a lot of people go in the background here, but I don't really need to. It's too valuable having little spike boosts and green slime boosts. If you went in the back, you'd be able to move at normal speed through this whole thing and not have any obstacles. But it's weird, because in a Taz, the obstacles actually speed you up. You can see I've now lost both my masks to the flames, and that's because I really didn't want to wait for those flame cycles, but it will cause some issues a little bit later on. And this is the gem path we couldn't get to before. It was too high up to reach it without that red gem. I'm going to jump down through this box. I did have an idea of sub-jumping underneath it and bouncing off of it, but that didn't pan out. Here's where I have to kind of wait for the flames a little bit. I have to kind of slow down and bounce over them. It's a bit of a shame, but it is what it is. You can see me bouncing on one of those stacks of 4, and it looks kind of suboptimal. The real reason I did that is because I actually ran out of spins. Climbing those sections is really spin intensive, and even if you have 5 spins coming into it, sometimes you don't even have enough to do it optimally. Alright, so at this point I've got 2 levels left, which is the Boulder Chase level and Whole Hog. I'm going to do Whole Hog first, the reason being that won't push me forward on the map, whereas the Boulder Chasing level will. So Whole Hog's another auto-scroller, which gives me a perfect opportunity to talk about timing in this game. So the way that Taz timing generally works is it times from power on until your last input. So if I did Taz timing, the time for this Taz would be about 56 minutes and 41 seconds. Pretty good. But realistically, in a normal speedrun, you don't time like that. You time from where you press start on the title screen until when you lose control and see Torna. If I did that, this Taz would be 55 minutes and 56 seconds. Also pretty decent. But in fact, when I use the emulator, the loading times are slower than on the console. On consoles, people tend to run on PS2 with something called fast disk speed, and that makes the game load faster. This tends to save about 5 to 6 seconds every level, so that includes the loading times coming out and into the level. All that adds up, and it loses me a significant amount of time over the run. It's just a bit over 3 minutes in terms of loading times. So all things considered, if I did RTA timing, and if I did have the fast loads, this Taz would clock in at 52 minutes and 15 seconds. So it's unfortunate that the emulator doesn't have fast loads like a PS2 does, but technically the loads that I've got are closer to what a real PS1 would have. So on the Any% Taz, that was done on a different emulator that does have fast loads, and console speedruns have fast loads. So I guess the most accurate time to label this Taz would be as a 52:15, if you wanted to compare it to something like an RTA time. Not that you should compare Taz runs to RTA runs, because they're of course very different things. Alright, last level coming up is Boulder Dash, and we can actually get the gem this time. So again, pretty standard stuff, just zigzagging through the level doing spins, everything we've learnt so far in this Taz. I'm going to be outrunning the boulder quite a bit and you'll barely even see it by the end of it. I'm going to be bouncing on boxes in these corridors as much as I can, but the roof can slow me down because I'll bonk on it quite a bit. These platforms also give me the boost on them as well. Now unfortunately I have to weave around these things quite a bit, but luckily it doesn't lose too much time because of Z-axis optimization. And TNT spin there, that's the TNT that the speedrunners want their Aku Aku mask for, just in case they take damage doing that and die. And that's sort of the main reason why my level order can be different to theirs. When we get to the end of the level and we see the gem, if you ride that and hit the boulder, you can actually die during the cutscene. So it's really actually quite important that I outrun the boulder here. Otherwise I might hit it right now and then I would die. These boxes in here are quite tricky to get actually. You've got to kind of bounce up and then get the two underneath. But I can use the plants to break a lot of these boxes here. And that's going to be 100%. I'd encourage you to watch the percentage counter here and watch it jump straight up to 100. It's pretty funny. The reason being is because right now it's like, oh, let's count all the bonus levels that you should have done. I don't quite know why you don't have to do them, but it's pretty nice that we don't have to in this task. Okay, now we're going to head to the Great Hall. So we actually haven't beaten Cortex yet, we just go straight to the Great Hall and unlock the secret ending. And that's 100%, we get the secret ending, it's all good. So there's kind of like a path of gems in the Great Hall, and that'll allow us to get through and actually access the end of that level. Alright, so we've got these lovely clear gems making a path. You might be wondering, is it possible to skip some gems? The answer is yes. If you use zip-zagging, which we didn't use in this run, you can actually get through this entire level without getting any gems. And you can see that in the any % low tab if you choose to have a look. And that is the run done. As just a reminder, in Taz timing, that's 56:41. With the equivalent RTA timing, that's 55:56. But if we had the fast loads like a console does, RTA timing would be a 52:15. This Taz also had 257,921 re-records, which basically means that's how many times I went back and redid something to try and make it better. We often see Taz's as a finished product, but it's important to remember that quite often months or sometimes even years of work go into making them optimal. So thank you for watching this commentary. I hope you found it entertaining and informative. If you liked this content, then you may enjoy some other videos on my channel. I have other commentated Taz's like Crash 3 and a plethora of other games. I also have RTA speedruns, Taz tutorials, Taz podcasts, glitch discovery videos and explanations, along with pretty much anything I find interesting in video games. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, a subscription to the channel is always appreciated, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I would also encourage you to check out the rest of the Crash community. This Taz wouldn't have been possible without the collective knowledge and support from them. I've been very lucky that there's still such a large group of people that's so interested in this game. That's all from me, and thanks for watching. Just jumping in with a last minute edit here, the Taz you just saw had a revisit to Rolling Stones because the blue gem is needed to get all the boxes. But about a week after this Taz was finished, Lucademus found a way to skip this revisit. In fact, this was found right as I finished recording this commentary. This revisit skip could have saved a little over a minute if it was included, and I'll link the original discovery video in the description so you can see what it looks like. While this is an amazing discovery, this was found at a very unfortunate time as it couldn't be included in the Taz. If I had included it, I would have had to redo everything after Rolling Stones, which pretty much means redoing the entire Taz. Given that it took hundreds of hours to make this Taz, this really wasn't an option for me. This is the nature of Tazzing though, in that discoveries are often found during or after a Taz is completed. This kind of thing also happened with the Crash 3 Taz, Banjo-Kazooie 100% and Spyro, just to name a few examples. I might come back and do a version 2 of this Taz someday, including the trick, but that might have to wait as it's only one of many projects that I want to work on in the future.